Hey, it's me, JR, the video gamer, and I'm going to show you a G4 special, the making of Ultimate Spider-Man.
He's a different kind of hero.
There's something about a guy who's swinging across town on a spider web.
The idea of a superhero with everyday problems, as revolutionary today as it was when he came up with it.
My publisher, Martin Goodman, he hated everything about it. He wouldn't let me publish it.
It totally revolutionized the comic book industry.
Who fights crime in a very special city.
What we really wanted to do was bring you Spider-Man's New York.
His name is Spider-Man. And when Activision and Treyarch set out to make the biggest Spider-Man game of all time,
by the time this game is done, well over 100 people will have had their hands on this project.
We have more supervillains and superheroes than any previous Spider-Man game.
the results are spectacular. This is the making of Ultimate Spider-Man. It's the early 1960s, and Marvel Comics wants Stan Lee to create a new superhero.
Well, I had been doing comics for so long, came up with the Fantastic Four, then I did the Hulk, and they were both very successful, so my publisher, Martin Goodman, he said, hey, come up with another superhero. So I thought of Spider-Man, and I told him about it, and man, he hated it. He said, Stan, people hate spiders. That's no name for a hero. Then when I told him I wanted him to be a teenager, he said, don't you know anything about what a superhero should be? He hated everything about it. He wouldn't let me publish it.
But Lee decides to go ahead with his story about a teenager named Peter Parker who gains amazing powers after being bitten by a radioactive spider.
We had a magazine called Amazing Fantasy, and we were going to drop it. When you're about to drop a magazine, nobody cares what you put in the last issue. So I featured Spider-Man on the cover and had a story of Spider-Man. Well, when the sales figures came in, that had been our best-selling magazine of the whole year. So Martin walked into me. He said, you know, Stan, do you remember that Spider-Man character of yours that we both liked so much? Why don't you make it a series? And that's how it happened.
In 1963, the web-crawling hero gets his own comic book.
Spider-Man proved to be a very popular character in the 1960s. He had had his own book, which was Amazing Spider-Man, for the longest time.
Spidey's adventures are brought to life by Stan Lee and artist Steve Ditko.
Stan was scripting all the stuff, and Steve plotted most of it, and Stan dialogued it. Together, it was something magical.
Steve Ditko's artwork had almost a Picasso feel to it. It was almost cubist, and if you look compared to other comic books of that time, no one's ever imitated him. It's a very unique look to it.
Steve Ditko pretty much created everything cool about Spider-Man. All of his major foes were created during Steve Ditko's run. Right on down the line, from the Green Goblin to the Vulture to Dr. Octopus and Sandman.
Everything about Spider-Man, from his costume to his alter ego Peter Parker, draws in readers, and comic book fans can't get enough.
Stan Lee really rocketed into fame for creating heroes that had flaws, that had a real life, that had a personality beyond the cape and cowl, beyond the spandex.
One of the things that made Peter Parker really so very successful is what my publisher objected to. It was all the problems.
He's Peter Parker first, and it's kind of Spider-Man second. He's a younger character, so who's got real-world problems. He lives alone with his aunt, and he goes to high school, and he's got a girlfriend, and he tries to balance all these real-world things that kids in society just relate to.
The idea of a superhero with everyday problems, as revolutionary today as it was when he came up with it. It's so mundane in a way, but it totally revolutionized the comic book industry.
He forever kind of changed the way we look at heroes.
At the heart of the Spider-Man mythos is a key lesson.
With great power comes great responsibility. Really think about that. You can actually live by that code, and only that code, with no religion in your life, and live a very fulfilling life. It's an amazing idea.
The Spider-Man phenomenon just keeps growing.
At some point, they decided, this guy's a marketable quantity. We gotta do something more with him.
And soon, the name Peter Parker will become more well-known than Marvel ever expected. After more than 40 years of crime fighting, Spider-Man has become a household name. Comic book artists such as Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson gain notoriety from their work on the Spider-Man comics. The friendly neighborhood web-slinger spawns numerous comics and 2 blockbuster films.
Oh, you didn't have to be a genius to realize how successful Spider-Man was. Well, the book sold like there was no tomorrow.
Soon after the turn of the new century, Marvel launches Ultimate Spider-Man, a modern retelling of the classic hero.
With the Ultimate books, we're able to just start over from scratch. It's about our world and our times, but still about the classic magic of a Marvel comic.
It was exciting to take the Ultimate approach to the character, where he's younger and he's dealing with kind of different things.
Peter Parker in the Ultimate series is a web designer, not a photographer. He deals with a lot of current day issues. When the comic was first conceived by Stan Lee in the early 60s, there are a lot of issues that might not resonate as well with teens today. So we've actually taken the storylines from the Ultimate comic book series, which is really updated, to modern day.
Ultimate Spider-Man becomes a smash hit for Marvel. And it soon catches the attention of Activision.
We looked at what was going on in comic books today, and really Ultimate Spider-Man, the comic book from Marvel, was the #1 seller in Spider-Man comic books right now. So that's what we really wanted to go after.
Activision enlists Treyarch to create a game based on the new series.
Treyarch and Activision started working together in the late 1990s on a couple Tony Hawk games for the Dreamcast. They also did a Spider-Man game for a Dreamcast. Treyarch was the perfect fit.
Activision approached us in April of 2003 with the idea that they wanted to do a Spider-Man game based more on the classic Spider-Man comic book license versus the movie games. We have been the company that's done both of the Spider-Man movie games.
Development of Ultimate Spider-Man begins in June 2003. To ensure that they do justice to the series, Treyarch turns to the people behind the comics for guidance.
One of the first things that we wanted to do was to go after some of the talent that was involved in the creation of the comic book for Marvel. So we went after Brian Michael Bendis. We wanted to bring him in very early on and have him help to craft our story.
Bendis is great. He is so synonymous with Marvel now. He writes so much of our stuff, from Spider-Man to Pulse to Daredevil. Brian is the epitome of Marvel.
They presented us with an idea for the game that was so loyal to the comic book. It was so flattering.
We also wanted to involve Mark Bagley, who is the sole illustrator of all the Ultimate Spider-Man books. We brought him in, had him do all of our character concepts.
Mark Bagley is a wildly underestimated artist.
The nice thing about Bagley's look is it's kind of a more clean, stylized look. That's what makes it so really easy transition for the guys at Treyarch to make his look work in 3D.
To attain a look that stays true to the comic books, Treyarch implements an entirely new graphic style.
The look was the first thing that jumped out at us. The Ultimate Spider-Man, it doesn't look like any of the previous Spider-Mans. It doesn't look like the movie. It's its own entity, and we really wanted to capture that because it was very exciting and it was very new.
Ultimate Spider-Man's really sort of like Spider-Boy. He's still in high school, and so he's got sort of this egg-shaped head and a thinner neck, and these elongated features.
So we spent a lot of time examining all of the books at that time, trying different techniques to try and capture that look. We didn't want a Saturday morning cartoon look. We wanted something that was like modern comics are today.
So we wrote a new shader from the ground up. It's a combination of texture maps and our own shader technology. We use a very high polygon model to achieve the inking style. These characters are up to 7,000 polygons. He's closer to 9,000 polygons.
3D comic inking technology is something we created here in-house. What it does is it creates this comic feel for the game. When you see the characters, they're just more three-dimensional. There's more depth, there's more shadows. You're seeing these characters as if you're really standing right in front of them.
A new approach to graphics isn't all Treyarch does to capture the feel of the comics.
In looking at comics to see what we wanted to try to bring, we examined them, and some of the obvious things that came out were panels and storytelling.
You have to have panels. That's what the comic book meeting is about.
The motion graphics panels really drive not only our story, but they drive gameplay as well. So as Spider-Man, for instance, is swinging down the street and we've got a person trapped under a burning car, you'll have a panel that will fly up on the screen and then seamlessly integrate itself right back into gameplay.